the leader in talk radio on the Internet, right here on K98Talk.com.
If you want to work until you keel over, have less of everything in retirement, or give back more of your hard-earned money to the stock market again, then just ignore me. But if you'd like to protect the money you save, receive a steady, predictable retirement income, and enjoy financial security for as long as you live, then listen to this. You can download a free report that reveals the wealth-building secrets Wall Street and the banks don't want you to know. You'll learn how you can get guaranteed growth, safety, and real prosperity without risking your money in the Wall Street casino, and how to get the money you need when you need it, simply by asking for it. This is the best way to have a 100% secure retirement, and know your money will last as long as you do. To learn more about this method, and to get your free report, go to 29security.com. That's the number 29security.com. 29security.com. Go to 29security.com.
This is Slickery Trigger for Rebel Road Tactical. With proper care and feeding, your pistol will be ready when you need it. There to save your life. Shouldn't your gear be that good? Whether you need a holster for comfortable everyday carry, or a tough-as-nails holster for your next training course, Rebel Road Tactical has what you need. Check us out on the web at rebelroadtactical.com.
Tired of paying outrageous prices for Viagra? Well, we have great news for you. Now you can finally get Viagra at huge discounts. Healthy Man allows you to save up to $500 on Viagra. Why pay U.S. pharmacy prices of $15 per pill or more when you can get Viagra for less than $3 a pill? Call today and get 40 Viagra pills for only $99. This can cost as much as $600 at your local pharmacy. You can't afford not to call us. If you want Viagra at the lowest prices, never pay $15 a pill pharmacy prices again. Get Viagra for less than $3 a pill. Call 1-800-516-7602 today and save up to $500 and get 40 pills for just $99. Healthy Man is fast, easy, and affordable. Operators are waiting at 1-800-516-7602 to take your call right now. Call 1-800-516-7602. That's 1-800-516-7602. Again, 1-800-516-7602.
In these uncertain economic times, you've got to do whatever you can to save money. One of our biggest expenses can be our cars, especially when unexpected repair bills hit. Not anymore. If you own a vehicle with less than 130,000 miles, is less than 12 years old, has a warranty about to expire, or even no warranty at all, you could stop paying for car repairs. Roadside assistance, towing, and rental coverage are all included. Don't wait for the next repair. Make one free call right now to see if you qualify. If your vehicle is less than 12 years old, has less than 130,000 miles, even if it's out of warranty, paying for car repairs can become a thing of the past. Call us right now and get your car protected before your next repair bill hits. Get protection and no more repair bills. Call 800-696-1030. Again, 800-696-1030. That's 800-696-1030. 800-696-1030.
All right, folks, this is Rick Robinson with you. I want to tell you about some friends of mine from a company called Security Enforcement Specialists. When I ran my security agency for 12 years, I worked with one of these partners on a daily basis. He's been involved in this agency now, and with his other partner, they do have over 30 years of experience in the private security industry. If you own a business and you need someone to keep you or your customers or residents safe, then I highly recommend contacting Security Enforcement Specialists today. Give them a call at 405-703-1796. Again, that's 405-703-1796. Again, tell them Rick from K98 Talk sent you. Like I said, if you need the help, they are here for you. So make sure that you go look them up, check them out, and see what they can do.
Wrong way. Welcome to the place.
Joe had huge problems with the IRS.
I knew it was coming. I hadn't filed taxes since 1990.
All the IRS letters coming in added up to a nightmare.
To get up to like $68,000, my heart started beating fast. It's like, there's no way, man. I mean, I ain't going to be able to do this.
Then they stopped his paycheck.
So that's when I started making phone calls and found U.S. Tax Shield.
U.S. Tax Shield went to work immediately.
They just took the bull by the horns. What blew my mind is he called the IRS right then and there.
So why is U.S. Tax Shield A+ rated with the Better Business Bureau? Joe knows.
They saved me a ridiculous amount of money.
If you owe more than $10,000 to the IRS or state, choose the company Joe chose, U.S. Tax Shield.
It was the best decision I made. U.S. Tax Shield is the way to go. Life is good. Thank you, Lord.
Call 800-471-3287.
U.S. Tax Shield. Boo-rah. Yes.
800-471-3287. 800-471-3287.
The Internet will never be the same. You're listening to K98Talk.com.
Whoa! Good God, y'all. What is it good for? Absolutely. Now get set again.
Prepare yourself.
Okay, let's go. From a studio deep in the heart of Texas.
You're not going to believe the garbage that fell out of his mouth.
The voice of the working man.
This clown had the audacity to say that.
It's the Gavin Mitchell Show.
It's not a race issue. It's a First Amendment issue, and we all just need to understand that.
And now, here's your host, Gavin Mitchell.
Folks, the con man in chief has returned from his $70 million vacation in Hawaii playing golf while the rest of the world works. And he is back to business again, attacking our constitutional rights and liberties, namely the Second Amendment. Welcome to the Gavin Mitchell Show. I am Gavin Mitchell, and once again, this president is attacking guns as vigorously as he possibly can, and it is time for us to stand up and say no, because others are following suit. Upon his return, he wanted delivered to him the executive orders and recommendations by his staff that he ordered before he left on his vacation to tighten background checks and close these, quote, loopholes, if you will, in the gun buying arena. Now, I am here to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that guns and the gun laws are not responsible for these crackheads shooting up these churches, San Bernardino, any other place that these mass shootings have taken place. It is not the gun's fault. And these terrorist attacks we have, it is not the gun's fault. Not one time have these guns jumped off the shelf and said, hey, owner, would you please take me down to the mall so I can spray bullets everywhere? Not once. It is the individual behind the gun, and removing guns from law-abiding citizens does not stop criminals from having guns. I don't know how many times we have to say it and how much clearer we can make it to this president that taking guns out of law-abiding citizens' hands is not the answer. Now, the con man in chief met with the attorney general and other advisors yesterday, and they have come up with a plan that he feels is airtight, that he feels is legal. And within this plan is going to be expanded mandatory background checks for some private sales. So if the president gets his way and he signs this into law via executive order, it will not matter if you are buying a gun from, say, your neighbor. Your neighbor wants to get rid of his 9mm and you're interested in a 9mm. They now have to be federally licensed, and you must go through the mandatory background checks to purchase that weapon. I don't know of any American that is okay with that. It is absolutely unacceptable. Moreover, this president has ordered or will order through executive order more funding for mental health treatment, more funding for the FBI and ATF and explosion agencies or explosive agents. Why couldn't we fund them when we were talking about these Syrian refugees flowing into the country and we needed to vet them better? Why then can we not fund them so that we can vet them and assure the safety of the law-abiding citizens in this country? Why is it only when this president attacks our Second Amendment right to own guns do we start funding these agencies to make sure we can prevent that from happening? This president is a Marxist through and through. And what do I mean by that? Let's just dummy it down to the simplest level. This president is trying to impose a new governmental system on the citizens. He no longer wants a republic and a government that is for the people and by the people. He wants this government to run every aspect of your life right down to the protection of you and yours, your family, and he wants to dictate whether you have the right to purchase a firearm or not. And that is not what the founding fathers had. This president does not have the authority, nor does Congress have the authority to strike down constitutional amendments. Never have they had the authority. The only way the Constitution can be amended is through a convention of the states. That is it. Congress must elect for it to happen, and then it must go to the states to be ratified. Nowhere in there does the president come in at all. He does not have the authority to attack our Second Amendment rights. Ever. Moreover, a question for the President of the United States. Why is it that when we are dealing with refugee Muslims and terrorists, are we concerned about due process? Are we concerned about the First Amendment? Your freedom to practice religion, your freedom of speech, your right to assemble. And why is it we're concerned about the Second Amendment when we're talking about non-citizens in which it doesn't even apply? But when we are talking about law-abiding citizens, born and raised in the United States, that pay their taxes, that go to work every day to support their family, and they want to protect that family from the bad guys this president is letting in through the Syrian refugees and this open border he has 4 states wide to the south, it's the Constitution null and void. It's a flawed document. We're not interested in listening to that. Mark Levin said on his show that this president is standing on the shoulders of Woodrow Wilson, but he is much more bold and he is much louder in his intentions. When he came back from Hawaii for his vacation, he said in no uncertain terms, I have unfinished business. And he's not interested in the checks and balances that the Constitution provides for a rogue dictator president. He's not interested in that at all. He's going to pin it right into law through executive order. Now, what does Mr. Obama have to say about this? He was on CNN remarking Monday.
The good news is that these are not only recommendations that are well within my legal authority and the executive branch, but they're also ones that the overwhelming majority of the American people, including gun owners, support and believe in.
Let's take those in reverse order, ladies and gentlemen. First off, I don't believe in them. I don't like them. I don't like you overstepping your bounds, and I do not like you attacking my constitutional rights and liberties, Mr. President. And I would argue that everyone listening to this program feels the same way. There are hardworking Americans that believe in the Constitution of the United States, that believe it is one of the greatest documents ever produced by man, and from that came the greatest country man has ever known. And you are taking it out back and you are ripping it into pieces and lighting it on fire because you feel you're smarter than they are. You feel you have a better plan. Perhaps you feel that this Constitution is outdated. Well, sir, we disagree, and we disagree a great deal. We disagree so much that to help check you, we went to the ballot boxes and we gave the House and the Senate right back to the right in landslide elections. The problem is they didn't have the backbone to stand up to you. You are running rogue, and you are attacking everything we are. Now, the first point you made, you feel it's well within your legal right to do this. Garbage. Absolute and complete garbage. Need I remind you that just a year ago, you issued an executive order on amnesty, and you said the exact same things. Obviously, you wouldn't have signed it into law if you felt it was outside the scope of your authority, but you did, and it was wrong for this country, and the judiciary rightfully struck it down. And now more taxpayer dollars and more effort and more time is going to have to go into you and this executive order to put you back in check so that we can move on about our day being governed by the Constitution and the government that came from it, not from a rogue Marxist president. We have absolutely had enough. We have had more than enough, and you don't seem to care. I don't understand it. Now, in less than a year, this president is out. He's going to, I guess, go to Hawaii and play golf because that appears to be what he does anyway. Where does that leave us? Well, Hillary Clinton on the campaign trail commented on this and said, I applaud the effort. Of course you do, Miss Clinton. You are a continuation of this animal that is running this country. You know, and he stood up there and he told us exactly what he was going to do, folks, and he did it. He said he was going to fundamentally change our country for what he felt was the better. And he did. He fundamentally changed our country. Whether it was for the better or not, I guess that's up for debate. I'm here to tell you it's not. We have taken 3 giant steps backwards, and if we're not careful, we're not going to be able to right this ship. Miss Clinton continued, I don't think that's enough. I don't think this executive order is enough. Miss Clinton, what is enough? Melting down all the guns? Is that enough? If you're so anti-gun, Miss Clinton, why is it that you require your security detail to be armed at all times? For your protection, no. So if it's good enough for your protection, why isn't it good enough for John Doe who lives on 123 Main Street in rural America? Why isn't it good enough for his protection? Because you're a Clinton. Because you're a Clinton and you're a Democrat and you're leading this country and you know better than we do. That's why. And it's unacceptable. Now, tomorrow night, the president is going to sit down with CNN in a town hall meeting and explain himself. It is no surprise he's sitting down with CNN. CNN has been nothing but a prop to this president, playing to everything he needs, spinning it in the way they want. They are the classic case of the liberal media. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not a huge Fox News fan because they do the same thing, just the other way. I don't buy into that. I don't believe that. I think that the media has an obligation to report the facts as they are, and if there's an opinion show, fine. Voice your opinion, but your job is to not reword and sugarcoat what's really happening. And what is really happening here, folks, is this president is out to attack your Second Amendment rights. And we've gone on this long list of all the rights and liberties guaranteed to us by the Constitution that this administration has trounced all over. He continues to attack who we are. He continues to attack our culture. He doesn't care about our borders. He wants and allows, as we mentioned in one of the shows earlier this week, for transgender individuals to go into the same locker room as our kids, regardless of their anatomy. He is rogue. He is absolutely rogue. And folks, we are at a point where we do not have a party to stand up to this president. We do not have a Republican Party anymore. John Ryan and Mitch McConnell just keep on spouting these excuses as to why we can't do it, why we won't do it, why next year's the year, and it's the same song and dance we've heard before. And so before we go to break, I want to tell you, I am finally giving in. The Article 5 Convention is the only way we protect who we are as a country. And early next week, I believe Monday's show, we are going to have Mark Meckler, the head of the Article 5 Convention, the Convention of States organization, on to explain to us exactly how we're going to do it, tell us about what it is and why it's necessary now. But Mark Levin has signed on. Chris Salcedo in the Dallas area has signed on. And folks, Gavin Mitchell, right now, you can write it down in ink. I am officially signing on. It is time to check this federal government in a way that we have not checked them ever before, because these are unprecedented times and they call for unprecedented measures. The founding fathers put this safety net up for times exactly like these. Now, the federal government isn't the only one running rogue when it comes to trouncing on your Second Amendment rights. If you live in California, I don't even know what to say about this. They have passed a law that they are calling gun violence restraining orders, and this went into effect January 1st of this year. Now, simply put, if a judge determines that you no longer need your firearm, without hearing from you, he can issue a restraining order, and the law enforcement officer which serves that jurisdiction can come to your house, knock on your door, and remove your firearms without notice. Basically, what has happened is if a judge determines you no longer should have a gun, you no longer have a gun in California. It is that simple. Now, you will hear the left spin it this way and that. Well, we're only going to do it for people who might be mentally disturbed or who have made threats. Maybe for the here and now, that's true. But have we not learned our lesson that if we give these left-wing liberals an inch, they are going to take a mile? And that's where it starts. It starts with, well, we're going to make this decision. Never mind due process. Never mind hearing from the person you're going to take their guns away from. That's moot. We don't care about that. What we care about is getting all of the firearms we possibly can and putting them into a pile and melting them down, because California believes wholeheartedly that is the answer to gun violence. And just as I mentioned in the first segment, that is not the answer to gun violence. Guns don't shoot themselves. Kitchen knives don't pick themselves up and throw them at people. Grenades do not drop the pin and throw it at soldiers. Tanks don't fire themselves. Nuclear weapons don't fire themselves. Weapons are tools. Handguns are tools. Rifles are tools. Assault rifles are tools. And our founding fathers have given us the constitutional right to bear arms. And as long as you are not a convicted felon and can meet the state's requirements, then you can obtain a gun. But now California is telling you that, yeah, you might be able to do that, but at any time we feel like it, we can come get that gun. It might be a Wednesday and sunny. It might be a Thursday and raining. The judge may have rolled out of the wrong side of bed. If he is not in a good mood and doesn't care whether you're a good person or not, and he is on board with this garbage, they're coming to get your guns, folks. You already have to have a bullet button on your AR-15 in California. Here's the next step: an all-out assault on your Second Amendment rights. It is a carbon copy of what is going on in Washington, and this is what happens when you let liberals take control of the government. The next step is they take control of your lives. They don't care if you don't want health insurance, you're getting it. They don't care if you want your doctor or you like your premiums. They're going to tell you what you want to hear, and then they're going to do what they want. And as long as we, the people, need the government, we need their handouts, we need their subsidies, we're dependent on them, they are going to continue to keep us under their thumb and rule us as they see fit. It is classic socialism in action, folks, in a democratic society. At what point do we wake up and say enough is enough? At what point do we say, hey, you know what? You're wrong, and at the next election, we show them how wrong they are with our vote. Wait, that's happened. It's happened at the federal level 2 elections in a row, and this party that calls themselves the Republican Party, that is supposed to be the opposition to this tyrant, folds and runs for cover every chance they get. And folks, that's why I close the last segment out with the only answer at this point is an Article 5 convention. Tune in Monday and listen to that discussion so you can get educated on the topic and we can begin to right this wrong, because the founding fathers put this safety net in place. They saw this coming. They calculated this possibility, and they wanted the states and the citizens to be able to get out of it if it were to happen. And it has happened. So stay tuned Monday for that. Now, just as California is on an all-out attack on your ability to possess a firearm, and they are going after them at all costs, the great state of Texas has taken an opposite approach. And Never have I been more proud to say I am from Texas than January 1st of this year, because open carry is in effect. Now, I want to be clear about my position on this, and I'll unpack it as we move along. But in Texas right now, if you have a CHL license, a concealed handgun license, and you are man enough to wear your gun on your hip, you can. Now, the rules still apply. You can't take it into gun-free zones. If a private business says no guns allowed, you can't carry it. A lot of government facilities won't allow guns in, understandably so. The rules still apply. But if you're walking down the street of San Antonio, Texas, and you want to strap your gun to your hip, you can now. I hear the argument for this. First off, I think it's absolutely the right decision as far as the Constitution is allowed. That Second Amendment says you are allowed to bear arms, and it doesn't qualify that. It doesn't say, well, if it's tucked in your jacket or under your bed. It doesn't qualify it. It says you have a right to own and carry a gun. And so I absolutely think it's the right play as far as the Constitution is concerned. But on a practical level, I want to know, why would you choose to carry a gun on your hip? You're allowed to conceal it. Why would you advertise to the everyday American that you have a firearm? If something goes down, you move from being an asset to a liability. Because if I'm a bad guy and I walk in and I start shooting, who are the first people I'm going to shoot? The people with guns, right? But if he doesn't know you have a gun, you are able to put him down much easier. And so I don't understand it. A lot of people are exercising this right to carry the gun. I think this is going to lose its luster as time moves on. I don't think this is going to be a fad that continues, but I'm glad we have it, because for the here and now, when things are so charged, it sends a message to the bad guys that, hey, we're not putting up with it. You've got your guns, we've got ours, and if I've learned anything, bad guys with guns are nothing more than cowards. They're cowards. They don't want conflict. They want the easiest route, the route of less resistance, and that's how they want to inflict their harm and do their damage. So by advertising we have guns on our hips, it's a deterrent. It is. But I don't think it's wise by the person carrying the gun on their hip. I just think it's a bad move. I think it makes you target number one instead of a secret asset that crazy guy knows nothing about. Lieutenant Governor Kim Paxton was on the Meet the Press show on NBC this past weekend. He was asked this about the open carry law, and Lieutenant Governor Paxton cited some pretty remarkable facts.
Texas is the largest state to have open carry. And let me also add this, Chuck, that everywhere that we have more citizens carrying guns, crime is less. There's a study showing that where states have open carry or concealed carry, but particularly open carry, the crime is down 25%. Murders are down.
Those facts are accurate, folks. They've been vetted. Doesn't that make some sense that the same message I've been preaching and other conservative talk hosts have been preaching is that guns are deterrents? And if that holds true, having a gun on your hip is a deterrent. No one is going to come carjack you if they see a .45 sitting on the dash. It is a deterrent. Crime being down 25% in the states that have open carry is a fact. You can't dispute it. Now, if we take that fact and we cross-check it with what Barack Obama is trying to do and what the state of California is trying to do, it doesn't add up, does it? It doesn't add up. And so what's the motivation on California and on the federal government? They are trying to inflict their will on us. It's that simple. They are trying to impose their way of life, their rationale, what they feel is best on the citizens that are supposed to be driving this bus. And they refuse to heed our warnings, and they refuse to listen. It's their way or no way. Now, Kim Paxton continued that Texas isn't done. This is just a first step. Things are going to get a lot easier for people to obtain guns if you're a law-abiding citizen, and Texas wants their citizens armed.
That is evolving. I passed a bill as a senator before I became lieutenant governor that changed the process of getting a permit to online only, for example. So all of the states are evolving, and I want to see a day when every American citizen can simply have a gun, does not have to go through a long ordeal or pay a high price. We're going to address that in Texas as well, because it's the right of every individual under the Second Amendment.
Absolutely. He couldn't be more correct, folks. It is the right of every citizen under the Second Amendment. And while Barack Obama cannot strike the Second Amendment, we've talked about it in earlier episodes, what he can do is he can write executive order that tightens that grip so tight that in a practical sense and in an effective sense, it becomes near impossible to own or possess a weapon. You still have the right to, but the hurdles are so high to overcome to get a firearm that it's not practical. It's not realistic. And that's exactly what he's trying to do with this executive order. That's exactly what California is trying to do with this new gun violence restraining order. It is absolute garbage, and it is an all-out assault on our Second Amendment rights. And folks, I say it over and over again, but I don't want my words to lose impact. At what point is it enough? At what point do we, the people, stand up and say, no, this isn't okay? You may not agree as an individual to own a gun. You may not think it's a great idea to carry a gun. You may not want to openly carry a gun, and that's fine. I have no argument and no beef with an individual who just doesn't like guns. But just as the First Amendment is such that your speech stops where it imposes on the next person, so does the Second Amendment. Your distaste for guns stops as soon as you start impeding on the next person's right to carry. I don't understand why this is so hard for our government to comprehend. At least in Texas, we can get that piece right. And many other states are in the same boat. They respect the Second Amendment and that right for their citizens, and they're going to honor it. But in some states, they have simply lost their way, and this federal government has absolutely lost their way, and we have no opposition party. I just can't underscore enough how important it is for us to protect those rights given to us by the Founding Fathers in the Bill of Rights and beyond, to preserve that and to hold it dear, because it's what's made this country great. Over the 200 and some odd years that we have been on the face of the earth, we have quickly risen to the greatest nation in the history of the world because of that document. And when we have tyrannical leaders up there stomping all over it, and Congress that won't stand up to him, or a president that tries to avoid the checks and balances in the Constitution, we get this. It's the Gavin Mitchell Show.
The Gavin Mitchell Show, the podcast, is brought to you by
Pinnacle Voice Studios and Sound Productions. Find us on the web at pinnaclevoice.com.
We'll be back in a moment.
Hey, everybody, it's Chris Salcedo from the Blaze Radio Network. You are listening to The Gavin Mitchell Show.
I hope you got your affluenza vaccine, because you are about to get a great deal of exposure to affluenza itself. Folks, welcome to the Gavin Mitchell Show. I am Gavin Mitchell, and right in our own backyard do we have a case of affluenza running rampant. It is in the news everywhere. The young man, Ethan Couch, out of Burleson, Texas, he's 18 right now, has fled to Mexico and was found in Puerto Vallarta and detained because he is wanted on a probation violation. We are going to dig deep into this. I'm going to give you the backstory. And as always, I'm going to give you my 2 cents, and I'm coming hot and heavy today, so buckle up. 2 years ago, Ethan Couch, at age 16, decided to drink too much, and any at all at 16 is too much. But drank too much, loaded up his F-350, brand new F-350, great looking truck, flew 70 miles an hour down the back roads of rural Tarrant County and flipped it and ended up killing 4 people, including a youth minister at a local church. Mr. Couch's blood alcohol level at the time was 0.24, and that is 3 times the legal limit in the state of Texas. Any detection of alcohol whatsoever at age 16 is illegal, but Mr. Couch was 3 times the legal limit of an adult at age 16. There was a lot of talk about this because he is a kid. And during the trial, an expert witness for the defense, the psychologist that was hired by the defense team to evaluate Mr. Couch and his family used the term affluenza. And what he means there is not the common cold that we catch, the flu, if you will. It's affluenza with an A, meaning that Mr. Couch was raised in a very prosperous family, if you will. They were very well off. And the psychologist argued that Mr. Couch was not subject to a normal upbringing. He didn't have the discipline he needed. He didn't have the parental guidance needed. And as a result, he very rarely, if ever, faced the consequences for his actions. He was allowed to run amok. He was allowed to do whatever he wanted without consequence. And as a result, had no real perspective of right and wrong as you and I might know it. The court also heard from this same psychologist who analyzed the family that they were profoundly dysfunctional. And I remember as this was going down that a few reports from local news media would say that Mr. Couch was often left in a very large house unattended for days and weeks on end. He was left to fend for himself. And so his dad owns a construction company in the Fort Worth area, and their annual revenue is right about $15 million. His parents divorced in 2007, and so he comes from a broken home that is very well off, a lot of money, and a lot of times, even if it's unintentional, parents will throw money or gifts or allowances, not financial allowances, but latitude in what you're allowed to do as a child to win that affection, because they feel like they're competing against their ex-spouse for the kids, even though that shouldn't be the case at all. The divorce should be between the two parents, and both of them should communicate that both parents love them equally, and it has nothing to do with them. But oftentimes you see this competition and this finger pointing, and oftentimes if money is there, money is thrown at the kids to buy their love, if you will, to buy their loyalty and their dedication. And it was reported on local news media that that's what happened here. And so here is a young man, age 16, comes from a very well-off family. There's no structure. There's no discipline. He's allowed to run amok. He's unattended. And he took to drinking. And the result of that poor decision led to another poor decision. And he got behind the wheel, and he ended up taking the lives of 4 people locally. And that devastated not only the families involved, not only the community, but one of those individuals was a youth minister at a local church. And now all those kids have to be told, and it has to be explained to them how this kid over here drank and got behind the wheel and took away one of their mentors, one of their shepherds in life. And it's just beyond words, because it's sad on so many levels to me. Because on one side, you've got this guy who drank too much and got behind the wheel, and by no means do I promote that in any situation, in any circumstance, ever. But he's still a kid. And he's a kid without a compass. And this kid without a compass took lives, and there has to be consequence for that. But in the other ear, I hear this argument, but he's a kid. And I'm so torn on this subject that I don't know which way is up, because you have to face the consequences for your actions. You have to be accountable. But he's a kid, right? And so where does the finger pointing go? Who's to blame? So this whole situation goes to court, and it was in a juvenile court, and in my opinion, rightfully so. And I'm going to bring a very extreme argument to the table to back up why this belonged in a juvenile court. And I hope the shock value of my words doesn't interfere with the message, but I feel like it's a very valid point. If you have a 19 or 20-year-old male who engages in sexual relations with a 15 or 16-year-old female, and on every level, it's consensual except for the age difference, that is statutory rape in the state of Texas. And the reason being, and justifiably so, I'm not arguing this shouldn't be the case, but the reason it's statutory rape is because that 15 or 16-year-old doesn't have the life experience to understand the consequences of entering into a sexual relationship. They don't have the perspective of what the outcomes of a sexual relationship could mean. And that is correct. That is 100% right. And I will stick to my guns on that every day of the week. The perspective is not there for that young lady to understand that pregnancy could occur. A sexually transmitted disease could occur. There are so many things that could happen as the result of her entering in that relationship that she doesn't have the scope and the life experience to understand that just yet. And it should be. But if that 16-year-old doesn't have the life experience to understand that, how can we expect a 16-year-old, on the other hand, to understand the consequences of drinking and driving? It's something I don't understand. And so I feel that it was absolutely rightfully so that this case belonged in the juvenile court. And the difference between a juvenile court and an adult court in these situations is the court must consider the well-being of the child defendant. What can we do? Rehabilitation is the motivation for this, attached to a punitive sentence. Where in the adult system, it is punitive first with a rehabilitation component attached to it. So at the forefront of a juvenile court's mind is rehabilitation. How do we get this person to right their wrongs so they don't destroy their lives and others further? So in this juvenile court, this judge, and I'm not going to name the judge by name because this isn't a burning at the cross of the judge. There are a lot of people here in town incredibly upset at this judge, the sheriff, the DA. And mind you, the DA used to be an adult district court judge. They are furious at the outcome of this case. But this case ended up with Mr. Couch receiving 10 years probation. And that 10-year period would start after he went to an intensive care intern treatment program. And this program cost $715 a day. And during the proceedings, the court proceedings, the family volunteered to pay for that. They said, we'll foot the bill. The court came back and said, absolutely not. This is state mandated. It's state ordered. You're going to pay what roughly ended up, according to the ABC affiliate WFAA here in town, about $10 a day for this rehab treatment. That infuriated people on a number of levels. One, this guy, and they didn't want to use the term kid, this guy goes out there and kills 4 people and is given treatment in which he doesn't have to pay for, although they have the means to, and is given 10 years probation. Well, as with any probationer, there's a risk that they just may not get it. They may have skated through unscathed. And that appears to be what happened, because Mr. Couch decided he was going to continue partying. And there was a YouTube video that came out with him playing beer pong at some party. And the probation department in Tarrant County, Texas, caught wind of this, and they did not issue a warrant just yet, but Mr. Couch saw it coming. So he failed to report to his next probation meeting. At that time, they issued the warrant, but Mr. Couch was gone. Gone, gone. And everyone in town was all the rage. The sheriff was going on local media. The DA was going on local media, and they wanted him, and they wanted him bad, because this was a stain for Tarrant County. This was a stain for the judicial system. This was a stain for the probation department, and they wanted this guy. They got a number of tips. He was in Europe. He was here. He was there. Turns out he was in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, and they caught him here a few days ago. Well, Mr. Couch and his mother were detained, and they were sitting in a Puerto Vallarta jail cell waiting for extradition. Well, because his mom's involved, they've got some money. And now, today, it comes out that his mom is being deported or extradited to L.A., not to Houston as it was first reported, to L.A. And Mr. Couch is on his way to Mexico City because they are fighting extradition. And a Mexican judge ruled, we're not sending him back just yet. We got to vet this out. Now, it's no secret that the Mexican judicial system may not be on the up and up as we would like for it to be. And so if you've got money, who knows what happens. So here we are. This kid kills 4 people, gets probation, takes off on the run, and his mom is guiding him the whole way. And that's where my problem comes in, folks. This kid, it is not his fault he was born into this family. It is not his fault he didn't have the guidance he needed. It is not his fault his parents decided to be his friend instead of his parents. It is not his fault he didn't get his backside wore out in Kmart when he was a kid for throwing a fit like I did. It is not his fault that happened. He made a horrible, horrible decision, and he should have known better. He obviously didn't take his treatment program seriously, and the light should have been on for that. And he should be punished, and he should be punished accordingly. However, how is it that just now we're starting to point a finger at his mother? We're starting to point a finger at his father and asking, where were you? Where were you when the chips were down? Because if you ask me, those parents' hands are stained with blood equally as much as Ethan Couch. They were not parents. They were friends. They threw money at him. They let him run amok. And the result is 4 dead people. And one of those people is a leader of young people in a church who will never go home to his kids, who will never celebrate another Christmas, all because you were worried your kid might not like you as much. It's got to stop. Folks, coming back on the other side, we have a very special guest. Hang tight. I am Gavin Mitchell. This is The Gavin Mitchell Show.
The Gavin Mitchell Show, the podcast, is brought to you by
Pinnacle Voice Studios and Sound Productions. Find us on the web at pinnaclevoice.com.
We'll be back in a moment.
Welcome back to The Gavin Mitchell Show. I want to remind everybody you can find us on the web, www.thegavinmitchellshow.com. You can email me directly, gavin@thegavinmitchellshow.com. Would love your feedback. You can find us on Twitter at The GM Show. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/The Gavin Mitchell Show. You can subscribe to the podcast via iTunes. We're also on Spreaker and TuneIn as well. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome a very special guest to the Gavin Mitchell Show, Patrick Fenari, author of Commoner Sense, The Working Person's Guide to America. Patrick, first off, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to you, sir, and welcome to the Gavin Mitchell Show.
Same to you, Gavin, and I really appreciate you having me on. I've been looking forward to speaking with you.
Oh, well, the pleasure is ours, sir, and I feel like it's important to let the listeners know that we have actually interrupted your Christmas vacation, your holiday vacation. You are down in the Caribbean right now talking to us via Skype. So if we have some connection issues, please understand that my gentleman here, my guest, is on the beach out there enjoying life. But I'd like to get right into it, Patrick. This read is a must-read, in my opinion. It is an incredible survey of the political and economical and social climate here in this country and what's led up to it, what you think the direction we should go is, and as I said earlier, a must-read. Could you talk to us a little bit about your motivation and your background to bring this book to us?
Well, that's a great observation, Gavin, because it is social, political, and economic, much as Thomas Paine's Common Sense. Mine, of course, is Commoner Sense. So it's a little bit of a play on words that I elaborate on a little later in the book. But I was very much motivated by Paine's outreach to the colonists and to the plain language that he was able to put out there to make his case for the separation of the colonies from England. And, at the time it was this pamphlet was a huge bestseller. And, even for people that didn't read, it was read to them. And this was all over the colonies. This Paine's Common Sense was read in taverns, fields, barnyards, churches, every place you could possibly imagine. And so I think that I really owe a lot to Mr. Payne to say, to start to think in my mind or put together, we need another pamphlet out there that is going to inspire people to understand and grasp what the idea of America really is.
Yeah, well, Patrick, I would say mission accomplished, because I was enthralled. It was tough for me to put down as I flipped the pages. And a comment I gave you off the air, and I'd like to repeat it on the air, is that there are a lot of brilliant people out there writing great things about this country, but sometimes you get them using language or talking over the common person's head. I count myself as a common man. Shoot, our mantra is the voice of the working man. I swing a hammer for a living. And there are times I find myself looking up what that word means in other people's writings, but you can tell it is well prepared, well researched, well written, but it's an easy read. And to me, that's such an attribute to your intellect and your ability to write, to communicate this message in a way that the common man can understand. And so hats off to you there. There is a quote early in the book that literally had me laugh out loud, and I've got to ask you about it. I've got to ask you how this came about and what it means. And you mentioned that Teddy Roosevelt's face, if it were up to you, would be wiped off Mount Rushmore. Now, that's a huge endeavor, and I know it's somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but I'd love for you to explain that to me.
Gavin, I'd like to reserve that space for Ronald Reagan's face instead, and go ahead and get Teddy off of there. And for all the accolades that have been said and written about Teddy Roosevelt, what most people don't realize is that one of the birth is certainly a huge catalyst for what we know as the modern progressive movement that we've been enduring for the last 110 years. The person that really kicked it into gear was Teddy Roosevelt, a Republican, and the Democrats ran with it. Now, in commoner sense, I do mention that maybe in the antebellum period before the Civil War or after the Civil War, there were some seeds of it going on. But he is somebody that really, in a certain way, was kind of the heart and attitude of what modern progressivism became.
I don't want to give too much away. I want to elaborate. I want to dig into it, but I really want our listeners to go out and read this book cover to cover, because I feel it's necessary. It is on the must-read list for the Gavin Mitchell Show. In Chapter 8, and you come back in Chapter 9 to kind of bring it full circle, but in Chapter 8, you make a comment that there's this notion out there that Americans may not be as educated as our counterparts across the pond. But in Chapter 9, you argue that maybe that's not a bad thing, because here in America, you're not limited by class, that your education level, your upbringing isn't as important as it might be over there. And you argue that that's as important as the invention of the wheel, in your opinion. Could you expound on that a little bit?
Well, the reason that I use the analogy that it's as important as the wheel, as the invention of the wheel, is because we had 7,000 years of so-called civilization, and our founders knew well the history from beginning to end. And on that whole timeline, that arc of civilization, the only thing in government that was truly different, it was truly a revolutionary idea, was the founding of America. Now, we do have roots that go back to the Magna Carta, and there were justifiably, I have to mention this, there were English revolutions and reformations that instilled some of our American ideas. There's absolutely no doubt about that. We owe a lot to them in a sense for that. But we are so different. It's so important. It very much was the average working person being able to have the task of governing himself to become much easier. So I thought it was a natural comparison to say it was like the invention of the wheel, because it began to move the average person forward in a big way.
Now, reading from beginning to end, there is no doubt that you're a conservative. It shines through, and our hearts are in line. But when I read the afterword, Patrick, there was something that stuck out at me that I've got to ask you. I've got to kind of poke you a little bit. in the afterword, you're writing what essentially is an open letter to your liberal friends, quote, both of them. And you make a comment that, well, they rebuke in this deal that you won't get what you want out of a conservative government either. And I'd love to hear more about that, because your argument was, well, what do you expect out of a liberal government? What is it you want? You're not going to get it. And their reply is, you're not going to get what you want out of a conservative government either. And you agree. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, here's how I look at it. I think that it's more apparent than ever that it's become an us and them thing, Gavin. And I'm not a let's compromise, let's be bipartisan, let's reach across the aisle guy. I don't even think that the 80-20 Reagan kind of formula, the famous stories, that I'm so tired of him and Tip O'Neill, and they would reach an agreement and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't really apply right now, Gavin. And the thing is that the way you look at conservatism, or the way that I look at conservatism, the present government that we have is not going to deliver in the way that you and I would like to. But I make the argument that it's really the lesser of two evils, because we can always slide into this notion of what I call in the book, throughout the book, not progressivism, but regressivism or collectivism, statism. It's all the same stuff. We can always slide into that hellhole later, at any time. Okay, so let's give the conservative approach at least a chance. And maybe we can see that, we can do a lot more for ourselves. I know this to be a fact. Conservatives will donate twice as much to charity on their own as they will through government force. Yes. So that's where I see a plus in the conservative argument. But right now, as a lot of people look at things and say, well, the Republican Party, that represents conservatism, they're not going to get exactly what they want out of that party.
It's almost as if you listened to some of my shows before you wrote the book. Yeah, without question. And Patrick, I love it that I'm a conservative, you're a conservative. This is a conservative show, but we're not closed-minded and ignorant and cut off. I'm sick of the argument that, well, conservatives, they want what they want and they are what they are and they're not going to listen to anybody. It is what it is. That's not true. Give us a good argument with good support, and we're going to listen and then make up our mind based on our principles. And it sounds to me that statement, while I took it out of context to play devil's advocate a little bit, I'll give you that. But your answer tells me that you are open-minded and just truly want what's best for this country. And that makes you a friend of this show, sir. And so I appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Patrick Furnari, author of Commoner Sense, The Working Person's Guide to America. Patrick, tell the listeners where they can find you, where they can get a hold of you, and where they can pick up a copy of the book for themselves.
Okay. The easiest way to get the book, of course, is on Amazon, and you can get an ebook or you can get a paperback sent to you quite quickly. And I do have a link to that that's aside from the Amazon link, that's a bit.ly link. It's bit.ly/Commoner Sense. That'll take you to Amazon, the Amazon site, basically. You can also follow me at Furnari Sense, and that's a capital F and capital S, so it's Fornari Sense on Twitter, or you can follow me on Facebook, and you can, I believe you can link there to a fan page I have that's under Commoner Sense. And on Facebook, I have a whole list of columns that I've written for an online newspaper on the East Coast called Magic City Morning Star, and they're at magic-city-news.com. And there's 16 or 17 columns that they've published of mine that I think some of your listeners would find quite interesting, and they deal directly with everything from the Second Amendment to Donald Trump, to Hillary Clinton, and everything else you can think of that's been in the news over the last year. And I try to put a conservative fine point on what I'm hearing and seeing in the news.
So, well, Patrick, thank you so much for your time, sir. Do not be a stranger. You are a friend of this show. And to the listeners, Ron is going to link up the information Pat gave us onto the website, so it's an easy find at thegavinmitchellshow.com. All the links, all the information Patrick just mentioned. Patrick, thank you, sir, and thank you for what you do. And let's talk soon, okay, sir?
Absolutely. It would be my pleasure, Gavin. I really appreciate it.
Folks, that's going to do it for today's show. Remember, in the words of the great Ray Wiley Hubbard, on the days I keep my gratitude higher than my expectations, well, I have really good days. I hope you have a really good day. I am Gavin Mitchell, and this has been The Gavin Mitchell Show.
Thanks for listening to The Gavin Mitchell Show, the voice of the working man, produced in Fort Worth, Texas. If you like what you just heard, subscribe on iTunes and Spreaker.com. These and other links can be found on our website at thegavinmitchellshow.com. Be sure to tell your friends and colleagues about the Voice of the Working Man's daily podcast. All opinions expressed by the host or guests on this series are solely their opinions and do not reflect the views, policies, or positions of the Gavin Mitchell Show or its affiliates. This has been a Ron Phillips, Pinnacle Voice Studios production.